Welcome to our second in our series of Interrupting the School to Prison Pipeline, put on by the Arkansas United Methodist Women. I am Brenda Gullett, and I have the privilege of serving as the Social Action Coordinator for our conference. I wanted to just give you what our working definition is for the School to Prison Pipeline. And it is that the School to Prison Pipeline is a term used to describe how children and youth of color, those that are disabled, also are rerouted by systems and institutions, funneled away from educational success and toward the criminal justice system. So I think it helps to know exactly what the parameters are of the situation that United Methodist Women now have for their second four-year quadrennium of a national priority of interrupting the school to prison pipeline. So welcome. And our segment tonight is entitled Projects That Impact the Pipeline. And I'm so excited to introduce our guest in a moment for you tonight. But as we are lamenting the violent actions of racism and systemic oppression that have been on display in recent months, I offer this prayer from the Reverend Gina Yeske, from the Northern Region Resource Director of the United Methodist Church of Greater New Jersey. Would you bow with me? God of goodness and grace, your world, your children cry out to you. Heal our broken bodies, minds, and spirits. Restore our hope, our joy, and our trust. Show us your ways of justice and mercy. Help us to live lives in a way that it leads to peace and unity. Keep us surrounded by your love, centered in prayer, focused in holy living, dedicated to righteousness, hope-filled for a better tomorrow for all. We pray in the name of Jesus and in the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen. I think Jacob may have said something. Our question and answer period will occur at the end, time permitting. So if you would put your questions in the chat box, and we will make certain that you get your answers. If not tonight, then we have a mechanism for getting information back to you. So we really encourage you to do that. Our first presenter tonight is Levita Wills Hale, and she is director of the Arkansas Out of School Network and has been since 2009. Levita holds a BA in political science and a master's in management and leadership, currently working on a doctoral degree in organizational leadership and development. In 2019, she spoke at the inaugural International SEL Exchange, and I think it's worthy to say what that acronym is. It is the Social and Emotional Learning Exchange, which is a unique and timely national forum committed to creating caring, productive, and equitable schools and communities that develop the whole child and ensure that all students can thrive. She is part of the faculty at the White Riley Peterson Policy Institute at Furman University. In 2014, she received the Rockefeller Foundation Award for 40 Leaders for 40 years. She currently serves as a commissioner for the Arkansas Martin Luther King Commission and a few of her many boards, the Arkansas STEM Coalition, the Arkansas Department of Education's Coordinated School Health Coalition, and the Arkansas Campaign for Grade Level Reading and Opportunity to Learn. The title of Levita's presentation tonight is The Importance of Out-of-School Time Opportunity in Disrupting the School to Prison Pipeline. I know that you will help me welcome Levita Wills Hale.
Thank you so much, Brenda, and thank you to all of you who are present here. Thank you so much to the United Methodist Women's Organization for the work that you all do to lift up these important issues for our state. I'll be brief tonight in my discussion, as I know we are on a tight timeline. And just give me a moment here and I'll start addressing slides. So the first thing I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about the Arkansas Out of School Network. We're a sponsored initiative of Arkansas State University within the College of Education and Behavioral Sciences within the Department of Childhood Services. And we are one of the 50 state after-school networks within the United States. And we're currently working to expand access to quality out-of-school time programs, which really means after-school and summer learning programs. Our mission is simple. We want to create safe, healthy, and enriching learning experiences for children and youth ages 5 to 19 during the out-of-school time hours. And so about a year ago now, we were thinking about how do we address this current climate, and Brenda has already so eloquently spoken to some of the societal challenges with race equity issues and the need for justice. And so in the spirit of positive youth development and social equity, the Arkansas Out of School Network is engaging in the Youth Opportunity Campaign, which is a social movement focused on closing the opportunity gap for young people across Arkansas, which includes the importance of after school and summer learning. And so it's important for you to understand why this is so critical. A couple of years ago, Fight Crime, Invest in Kids released a report that really looked at Arkansas, and what we know, or what we thought we knew, remains to be true. The hours between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. is a critical time for our young people. We know that this is when we see the highest incidence of young people getting into legal entanglements. But the good news is that if young people are participating in any kind of quality after-school experience or summer learning program, we see that there is a reduction in crime, there's a boost in their academic achievement, we can improve their behavior, lead them to healthier habits, and quite frankly, there's a return on investment, because rather than spending those costly dollars on incarceration, we can spend those dollars on prevention, and we know that that's always the better path and the better path for investments. I just want to pause to say, when I started my career more than 30 years ago, we were really talking about at-risk youth and a whole host of needs. But what we know is that it is so important that we address the needs of the whole child from a very early age. And so we know that really there are no vacuums. We either meet those needs in positive ways, negative ways, or we leave those unmet. And if we leave those unmet, the issue that we are addressing tonight, the school to prison pipeline, only becomes a bigger issue. So if we meet them in positive ways, we see examples here on the screen. We see belonging, mastery, a sense of autonomy or power, a sense of generosity and a concern, not only for themselves, but a sense of concern for their community. And these are all the positive things that we know will happen when we address the needs of young people in a positive way. But we also can see that when we address those needs in a negative way, in other words, if we exacerbate the school to prison pipeline by having overly restrictive push-out policies in school, or if we don't have appropriate wraparound services in school, or we're not really working to strengthen community and family engagement, then we know we see a whole host of bad outcomes for young people. And as you can see on the screen, we see a whole host of those negative attributes. And if you think about those unfortunate stories, and you think about what happens to young people, this is not the end of the spectrum that we want young people to end up on. And then on the next slide, we can see, oftentimes we think, well, if the child is quiet, if the young person is not necessarily getting into anything, then we've done our job. But quite frankly, that is not enough to just say, we're just going to have benign neglect. We're just going to leave them to their own devices and they will figure it out. Because when we do that, we can see severe consequences as well. And again, if you look at the research beneath this, which is positive youth development, We see a whole host of things that can happen to young people when we leave them to their own devices. When we say, and many of us, if we think and reflect on our childhoods, we can count numerous individuals. I know I can, that if it were not for them, in addition to my parents, that I would not be where I am today. And so we cannot leave these young people alone. We can't leave them alone to just figure it out, because we can see on the screen what happens when we do that. And if we think about all the horrible stories that we see of young people taking actions that are negative, whether that's violence or some other kind of traumatic event, we can see a lot of these attributes: the loner, the child whom we thought was just quiet. We can see how these things can play out and impact the trajectory of a child's life. And so in the research of positive youth development, we call these protective factors and promotive factors. And that's just a fancy way of talking about prevention and moving from the old paradigm of risk to seeing young people as assets who are worthy not only of our investment, but of our time. And so if we see on the left-hand side of the screen why after school, and we say after school, but it's really a catch-all for after school and summer and youth development opportunities. These opportunities need to be intentional. They need to adhere to best practices. They need to be structured in such a way that there's access to supportive and nurturing adults, that there's an explicit focus on not only what the young people are doing, but skills that come out of that are gateway skills or 21st century skills. What are these factors? School community partnerships and those relationships, feeling a sense of belonging and connectedness. And we know that we're talking about school to prison, and we know that unfortunately, many of our young people, if they're not attached, the Gallup Institute had a survey several years ago that says the higher the level of engagement or attachment in school, the higher the level of student achievement. So that really goes back to the core. From the very beginning, from day one, are we connecting with these young people? Secondly, peer relationships are critical, those friendships, those positive peer relationships. And then the parental support, the care, clear expectations, and really keeping our eyes and our hands and our arms wrapped around our young people. And then the children themselves. We talked earlier about having a positive self-concept, a sense of agency, and a sense of having a future and a purpose and a direction. If we do all these things, and this is what we get a reduction in substance abuse and misuse, better academic performance, fewer behavioral problems. But more important than that, we talk about a preparation agenda here, which means that our young people are not only fully prepared, not only can they survive, but they can actually thrive and have a direction and a plan for the future. And this requires resources, and it requires an intentional belief or a value on the part of the community and a public will to do this. And so I just want to run through a few slides. What's the landscape in Arkansas? We know that in Arkansas, we have about 61,000 young people participating. That demand continues to go up. But the downside is that we have more than 207,000 young people who would participate if there were a program available. In Arkansas, our access to after school is really driven by where the funding is. And so we can see sketchy program availability really on a widespread basis here in Arkansas, with some concentration in Northwest and Central Arkansas. What this looks like is on average about a little more than 5 hours is spent in a quality program, but we know that that needs to increase, and we're actively working on that. I will note that 66% of after school and summer programs are located in a school building. That's not necessarily a choice, but out of necessity, because currently that's where the infrastructure is. And so what are parents saying? They're saying this is a safe environment where young people have access to knowledgeable and caring staff, where they're building skills and getting their homework done and engaging in technology and really learning about the jobs and skills and opportunities of the future that will propel the economy, not only the economy of today, but the economy of tomorrow. Now more than ever, as we've seen through this pandemic, and I can't stress enough how young people have been impacted, our programs have been serving the children of essential workers, providing academic support, providing food and food assistance for young people and their families who were food insecure, and really curating and cultivating those resources so that our children continue to learn no matter what their circumstances, no matter what their zip code. And in many ways, I'll add, standing in the gap for children who, for whatever reason, when we went virtual in Arkansas, we know that had a tremendous impact, particularly on the children of just average, everyday working Arkansans, who quite frankly, did not have the luxury of staying home and working remotely and guiding their children through their academic instruction remotely. So this was really an important link that after school and summer programs can provide to support the well-being of children in any circumstance. Now more than ever, the almost 480,000 young people in K-12 need support. And we can see examples here on the screen of programs that were doing just that. We're a state where we have lower income working families, which means that 60% of the children in our K-12 system are qualified for free and reduced lunch, which means that we really need to wrap our arms and our hearts and our resources and our intention around these young people. Barriers to participation, we think about availability. My parents are from a little town in Southeast Arkansas called Rison, Arkansas, Cleveland County, very remote. There aren't many opportunities for programs in communities like that. So lack of available programs. And when they are available for our average working, lower income working families, it's still a cost too high, even at an average cost of $85 a week. And then there's no transportation continues to be a challenge, but these challenges can be overcome. And so I've already talked about the barriers. I'm going to continue here with a few minutes. There are just a myriad of benefits for these programs. They're academic, they're social, they're emotional, the long-term economic benefit. They give parents peace of mind. They help parents keep their job. They help the economy because many of these programs are putting back into their local economies. And so when we think about the return on investment, there was a dollar figure of 3 to 1 for every $1 we invest in these programs, we get $3 back. But I've seen statistics as high as 12 to 1 because we're doing so much more than just supporting those real isolated indicators. We're really helping those families as a whole. So for schools, we're addressing COVID. For communities, we're keeping them safer. We're making sure the kids are safe. We're making sure our communities are safe. And most importantly, we're really trying to keep kids out of the pipeline to begin with, which means that our most valuable resource, our children, will come back into our communities as citizens and as leaders ready to take their rightful place. I just want to touch a minute in the last 2 minutes that I have on this landmark American Rescue Plan. This is a game changer for children, or can be, if we do the right thing. And right now we're working with state policy leaders to address the needs in a whole host of areas to ensure that we have engaged active learning, that all the good things we know about quality learning in school and in the community, that those things happen. So what does this mean? Some big numbers on the screen, 30 billion. So when we think about Arkansas, Arkansas will receive 1.25 billion with a B, but we have to work to advise the State Department of Education and our local school districts to ensure that our kids get what they need. And because most of this, 90%, will go to local school districts, we have a wonderful opportunity to partner with them to really focus on summer learning and after school as a critical support to not only keep kids out of the school to prison pipeline, but ensure that we can recover from this pandemic and move forward with the kinds of educational structures and educational opportunities. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see some really, again, big numbers. But you know, I've been in public policy advocacy and youth advocacy long enough to know that money alone will not solve our challenges. We need to align our funding and our resources with our intent and our public will. And so I'll just simply end by saying, if you are interested in engaging with us on influencing our policymakers at the state and local level to ensure that we get this right, to ensure that we as taxpayers and citizens have the kinds of plans and structures in place so that we can impact not only this generation, but generations to come. I welcome the engagement. You can go to aosn.org and join us as we help our communities and all of the partners that we're working with, including United Methodist Women's Organization, disrupt and dismantle the school to prison pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Levita, for that wonderful program. I was introduced to Levita when I listened to one of the Kids Count programs put on by the Arkansas Advocates for Children and Families preparing for the session. And when I heard her, I said, I have got to know this woman. And so we set up a Zoom meeting and I told her, I said, Levita, what you do has United Methodist Women's name written all over it, because we have a fellowship of caring women that care about young people. And this will be a great opportunity for us to be informed about and join hands with you. So Levita, thank you so very much for taking your time to be with us. Our next presenter is Toyce Newton. Toyce is a native of Crossett, graduating from Henderson with a BS in sociology and an MS in gerontology. She founded the Phoenix Youth and Family Services, a nonprofit organization which creates economic, social, and community development opportunity for residents in the Delta. And this program has been used as a national model. Now, Toyce has retired after 40 years from the agency, but not the work. And she has started a consulting firm called TN, which of course stands for Toyce Newton, where she shares her experience and expertise. To name a few of her board memberships, she was on the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, the Crossett Chamber of Commerce, the Vera Institute of Justice. She has also been involved with Arkansas Advocates for Children and Family and the Arkansas State Board of Education, which is where I met Toyce, and we both served on that board. Her accomplishments include the Black Women's Agenda, their Education Award, the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Service Award, and the Janice Clark Mill Whistle Community Service Award. And she, like Levita, has received the Winthrop Rockefeller's 40 Leaders for 40 years. Toyce is a member of the Gates Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church and on the Board of Trustees. And Toyce has been a dear, dear friend for a very long time. And the title of her presentation tonight is What's in Your Backpack? Toyce. Let's see, I think Jacob might need to unmute you. Can you unmute yourself? Let's see. Can you, oh, I don't know. Let's see, I don't know where Jacob is. Oh,
I'm unmuted. Am I unmuted now?
you're unmuted now. Okay, great.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brenda. And Brenda's a good friend of mine and a colleague and a champion for the rights of children and families. And I was honored to work with her side by side on the State Board of Education, because we really raised some dust in that organization as it relates to taking an unorthodox approach and being mindful of the needs of families. So thank you, Brenda, for inviting me to this forum. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I thank the United Methodist Women for having the foresight and just the grace that God gives in being able to be in a position to support a call such as this. This is certainly a call that cries out for recognition and acknowledgement. And my theory is that it takes all of us, that we all succeed, we rise or fall, based on us encompassing and embracing young people and families. And so I say that, and I come, as Brenda said, I was at Phoenix 40 years, but I was there only 25 years. When I founded Phoenix 25 years ago, I had just a driving desire to know where I fit in life, and also a responsibility to be able to answer God's plea, God's question to me, Toys, what did you do for my people? So I saw it as an opportunity to be able to provide services or provide insight in terms of my life and my background as it relates to growing up with a single father in a home that many things could have gone wrong. And I see myself as in the faces of the mothers and the children of these families in everything that I do. And I know that but for the grace of God, I could have been in that situation. So I try to look at it like that. I grew up in the Methodist Church, and I can tell you that women there impacted my life in a way that I can only recognize now as a seasoned adult. I have to share a story with you about Mrs. Matilda. And you'll have to probably remember that Miss Matilda likely could not read or write. So when I would get up in church and do something, whether it be read the announcements or sing a song or whatever, Mrs. Matilda would come and she would just heap congratulations and praises. And I'm thinking, Miss Matilda, I just read the announcements, but it was her assurance and her wrapping her arms around me. So I say all that in prelude to say that Phoenix Youth and Family Services is designed to do just that, to wrap our arms around the young people that are at risk, to be those adults that advocate strongly with communities, with families, with policymakers, with local leaders, with local business owners to say, give our children a chance. We'll bring them to you trained, but give them a chance to advance themselves. So I want you to be able to sit back and relax. And I know some of us with Zoom are probably more relaxed than we'd like somebody to see, but let's just have a conversation tonight where we're sitting on our sofas or sitting on the floor and talk about the things that I've seen that impact young people in their lives. And when I was thinking about what I say during this presentation, I thought about Samuel L. Jackson and the commercials, and I know you've all seen them once or twice or many times, when he's doing the commercial for Capital One, and he says at the end, what's in your wallet? So I say to you, for us to look at the young people that we have an opportunity to impact, and that you as United Methodist women and missionaries in whatever part that you play, would say to young people and families now, what's in your backpack? Now, we won't use a backpack as a literal, we'll use it figuratively here for this presentation. And when you consider young people that are faced with circumstances beyond anything that we can really comprehend, we can give general pause or attention or acknowledgement to young people that are struggling in families that have many challenges, but exactly what does that look like? What does it look like when a young person goes home to their families? Are they safe? Are they cared for? So you come into the house, and I regress, because one of the things I think that we have to understand and describe in this scenario, in this story, in this analogy, is static. Now we can envision static in a radio or on the television, but can you imagine a situation where the static never stops? And I'd like to introduce you to a group of young people that have to live in a world where the static never stops. The TV is never turned off. The lights are always on. Someone is always cussing and fussing and having a confrontation. There's no groceries, the static of not having adequate food and not having adequate things that you need just to navigate life. So you walk into a house on a particular day, let's say at the start of school, So you got an empty backpack. So you're getting ready to go to school. So the day before you go to school, you realize that you don't have the most treasured possession of all. And for me, when I was growing up, that was new school clothes. You were judged by that, by your peers and maybe by your teachers, how you came to school prepared. So you find out that though you had anticipated being prepared for school with the first and most important thing, and that was school clothes, that you didn't have that. Then you have to scamper to find out where are the clothes that I'm going to have to wear. But you walk into a house where you realize that there are 3 extra people there that weren't there before you left to go to school. So where am I going to sleep at the end of the day? But even before that, there's not adequate food to make sure that you get what you need. And so you're faced with that. So you go through the day, you're worried about you don't have food, you don't have a place to sleep. Maybe the bed you slept in last night has 2 extra people or some people there that you don't recognize. Or maybe that bed is soiled from urine. So look at all the things. Okay, so there's a time for bed, there's a time to lay down, there's that time, but then you discover that someone's in your bed. So you move on. You think, okay, I don't have my clothes, I don't have adequate this or that, and I don't have an adequate place to sleep. I don't have what I need to do the things I need to do. Now, I go back again to Phoenix Youth and Family Services was established to be able to recognize, acknowledge, and deal with these issues. So we are here as a group of interveners to do the very best we can to make sure that we address those problems. So we have our annual back to school school supplies, but we realize that's not all the schools need, that's not all the students need. So we work with parents to get them ready to get their children back to school, because we know that what Levita has laid out all the risk factors and all the things that happen as a result of young people not having the attention that they need. So our job is to help to build the capacities of families to be able to meet the needs of their children and be able to sustain those needs in a way that would help them be able to continue and to change some things, basically, to look at those things that keep them from being employed on a regular basis that impact their families. So we go back to making an environment of helping to create an environment, because we're not lofty enough, or we don't think of ourselves in a lofty enough fashion that we think we can go in and change families. We go to assist families to make the change. And all of this, and if you wonder, where's she going with this? I'm trying to lay a background, a foundation for why young people have problems at schools. So we go back to the stack. So you understand that you come home and you've had all these things and all these needs that haven't been met. And you go to bed, you're hungry, and you wake up the same way. And so this is what our schools have to deal with. And this is what we have to do, and we have to work to try to prevent. So Phoenix Youth and Family Services and our staff work very hard to do the very best that we can to make sure that we interrupt the school to pipeline prison. The United Methodist Women, I told Brenda, I'm so excited that a prominent group of Christian women have come to the conclusions that we must stand up for this population, that we must address this, because except for those children, our children will suffer as it relates to things that they can't get, because children that are showing up at school with all these challenges. So that is basically what I want you to realize, and what I want you to acknowledge, or be able to acknowledge with me, is a lack of being able to turn off the static so you can realize or recognize the fact that when children come home from school, they're not able to study because the static is still there. The chaos is still there. Everything is still there because the static never turns off. And so these are the young people that are greeted in the schools. I had thought I was going to be able to share with you my screen and a poem that I wanted to, but I'm not going to be able to because I'm not that tech savvy. But I wanted to share with you, and hopefully, I know I haven't even gotten close to the time I've had, but hopefully we'll have time for Brenda for more discussion. But I want you to visualize one more thing before I get to the point. So what's in your backpack? Confusion, static, if you've got the lack of clothes, you also have the lack of supplies. But one thing is evident and apparent, that when the young person that I'm speaking to, as opposed to your sons or daughters or your grandchildren or my children, go to pick up a backpack, their backpack is full with school supplies. They're filled with notes of encouragement. They're filled full with things, even a note of encouragement to the teacher, maybe a gift. But here we have another set of young people that have a backpack that's so heavy that they can't even lift. And if they can lift it, which likely they can't, most of the time they'll drag it in. But most times they can't lift it. So they drag it to school, and it's full of things that nobody wants to address and nobody wants to encounter. So I want you to remember that adage, what's in your backpack? And remember that all children are not equal. Everyone is created equal, we know that. But everyone doesn't come to school on that first day or the 10th day or 135th day created equal. You come dragging a backpack. Now, certainly you know that something's going to ooze out of that thing, and that gook and gunk and all of that is going to filter out, and folks are going, and people are going to distance themselves from you because they simply don't want to get that on them, you know. But your life is going to be a part of that backpack. So when you open it, perhaps the stench of the urine soaked bed is going to come out. When you open it, perhaps someone will see that no supplies are there. When you open it, perhaps they'll see that there are no extra clothing, that you came in tattered clothes because that's all you'll have. Perhaps they'll smell you as an individual because you didn't have the opportunity to take a bath. So I wanted to close my presentation with this poem that I share with anybody that has an opportunity to listen. I was looking for my glasses, but I don't see them. But the poem is by Joshua Dickerson. And certainly after this presentation, or while you're looking, please Google it. And the name of the poem is "'Cause I Ain't Got a Pencil." Because we ain't got an alarm clock. Okay, I'm sorry, I've got to get some glasses, hold on. Okay, I'll start again. "'Cause I Ain't Got a Pencil" by Joshua T. Dickerson. I woke myself up because we ain't got an alarm clock. Dug in a dirty clothes basket because ain't nobody washed my uniform. Brushed my hair and teeth in the dark because the lights ain't on. Even got my baby sister ready because my mama wasn't home. Got us both to school on time to eat a good breakfast. Then when I got to class, the teacher fussed because I ain't got a pencil. I once did, now that's profound to me, it may or may not be to you, but I once did a workshop to a group of teachers in a junior high school. And I said to them, we have got to be more aware of the student that walks into our classroom. Now, perhaps that student, when fussed at about not having a pencil, completely lost it. But it wasn't about the pencil at all. It was nothing about the pencil. So in an age where we're asking teachers to do more and more, where we're asking to do things that aren't their job, I'm just saying that issuing this admonishment or this advice, consider those things that are in their backpack before responding. And consider that responding a different way will allow you to move forward with that young person and be able to get to the core of it and get them educated. And calling your local Phoenix Youth and Family Services might help also. But understand, it's not about the pencil, but it is. So I'll save any extra time for questions, Brenda, or the chat box.
Yes, we're doing great on time. And I think that after our next interview, we will be able to look at the chat box and see what and answer some questions tonight, which would be wonderful. So thank you so much for being on time. And thank you so much, Joyce. It's hard not to dissolve into tears when you hear those kind of things, especially from a person like yourself. who has been so committed to children for such a long time. So thank you so much for that. Our next presenter is going to be actually in the form of an interview. And, I've often heard it say that to mess up is human, but to really mess things up, you've got to have a computer. And so our next presenter told me that he lost his connectivity when he was in the middle of a board meeting today, and he was going to call in by phone. And so we're just going to make the best of that, because I know you'll be able to feel his spirit even through the phone. Our next presenter is Frank Anthony. Frank resides in Pine Bluff. He has a bachelor's degree in economics and business and a master's degree plus 30 hours in educational administration from the University of Arkansas. Frank served for 44 years in public education, primarily in the Arkansas Delta. He was superintendent of schools for 18 years in Pine Bluff, Warren, Eudora, and Dollarway. And he was an assistant superintendent of schools for several years in the Warren district. He's been a high school principal in Wilmot district. He's been a coach for 8 years in the Parkdale district. And for 4 years, he was commissioner of accountability and school improvement at the Arkansas State Department of Education. Additionally, Frank served on the Arkansas Blue Ribbon Commission on Public Education, and he was selected as the Arkansas Superintendent of the Year in 06 and 07. Currently, he serves on the Jefferson County Regional Medical Center's Board of Directors. And Frank added to his resume 6 words that sum him up: friendly, fair, flexible, firm, consistent, and honest. And I know this to be true because Frank came to Pine Bluff when my husband Bob was president of the school board, and they served together for 3 years. And both Bob and I have been admirers of Frank for many, many years. And so it is my privilege to introduce you to the great wealth of knowledge and the voice of Frank Anthony. So Frank, if you would like to say a word of greeting.
Thank you, Brenda and Bob, our old friends that go way back, and thanks to the United Women Methodist Organization for the opportunity to share on a program. And I'm nervous and scared because Lavita and Torch were on before me. And the only thing I can say about those 2 young ladies is that when I grow up, I want to be just like them. So I'm a little nervous, but I hopefully get over that. And I look forward for the opportunity to try to give some answers to some questions, Brenda. And remember, I've gotten old, so take it easy on me.
Okay, I'm going to take it easy on you, Frank. But I think your wealth of knowledge will just be amazing. I want to talk to you about 3 themes that have emerged as we talk about the school to prison pipeline. And one is the zero tolerance disciplinary policies. And these are used as a discipline tool. And many people feel that they are ineffective and outdated. And many believe that a zero tolerance policy does not allow for situational factors, for instance, what Joyce was just talking to us about, when delivering consequences, and it makes no provision for what we call restorative practices. So I want to ask you, from your experience, what do you think are the reasons for the increase in suspensions and expulsions and school-based arrests across the country in public schools?
Or a deep question, Brenda. The first thing I'd say in relation to those situations is that they are true, that we do have many suspensions that are unwarranted. We have many expulsions, and certainly where we have the school resource officers, we will get into school-based arrests that are occurring across the country. And from my perspective, some of the biggest reasons for that are cultural differences, a lack of understanding of different cultures, racial bias, believe it or not, the need for more extensive training and professional development, people who know how to supervise and being in a position to supervise, sometimes even on the playground, if you have people who are charged or in the hallways with supervising, the adults are socializing instead of supervising. And so I always said that you can't supervise if you're socializing. So you need people to spread out. The lack of experience in dealing with at-risk kids. And lastly, I would say to that is that many of the reasons why we're having so many problems is because, as Toyce and Levita has mentioned to some issues, Johnny can't read. And when Johnny can't read, he's going to get behind in grade level. He's going to become more at risk, and thus he will become an attention getter by being a troublemaker. So all of those and above have contributed to this increase in suspensions, expulsions, and arrests across the nation.
Okay. Well, we hear a lot of talk about alternative schools within a district. And I wanted to know if you think those are a positive solution. And from your experience, what would be some of the minimum requirements that you think students who are in a alternative school should meet?
Yes, that's a $64,000 question as to the effectiveness of some disciplinary alternative schools. There are some good ones and there are some not so good, but from my experience, they can be effective. The big thing that you need when you have an alternate school, especially at the secondary level, and that's where the majority of your problems are, middle, junior high, and secondary levels. The first thing you need is you need a curriculum that's a replica of the setting that they were in. If they are a 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th grade student, they are earning credits towards graduation, and any setback in that is certainly going to cause for more disruption and discipline problems. So they need a curriculum to continue when they're placed in the alternative school so that they can earn credit. And naturally, if they're going to do that, Brenda, they need a staff that's certified in the content areas so that they can teach to those subject requirements. And then they need some minimum amount of time to be placed in an alternate school so that it perhaps can be a deterrent, that they're not just going to go over there for a week or 10 days and come back. So I found that a minimum requirement would be at least a 9-week grading period, depending on what the offense is or was, or a semester, which is a grading period, or sometimes even a year, depending on the infraction that they've gotten themselves involved with.
Okay, great. Well, there's no doubt about it when you look at the news and you see the violence in our society, that we have such a heavy responsibility to keep schools safe, to keep children safe in schools. And so, what do you think might be some alternatives to keeping children safe, but also respecting the right of all children to stay in school and have an education? Do you think there's any way to have a win-win on that?
Well, first, you got to have a mindset that you want the kids in school and that you need them there, and that you want to prohibit the school to prison pipeline. You want to prohibit that. And we talked earlier about, zero tolerance discipline policies. I can recall when I came to Pine Bluff, we had a 3 strikes you out policy. And the first thing I said to my building principals was that we don't want to be Don Drysdale and Sandy Koufax. Those were great pitchers for the Dodgers back in the 60s, who were strikeout artists. We don't want to be those. We don't want to strike them out. We want the kids to get a hit. So you have to prepare yourself with appropriate school policies and administrators that know how to interpret and utilize those policies to the best of their ability. You have to have visibility of staff during all times on a school campus. an ounce of prevention, Brenda, is worth a pound of cure. So if you got visibility and proper supervision, you can eliminate a whole bunch of your problems. The other thing that you have to do to help alleviate this situation is build relationships with kids. When you can get out and build relationships, whether they are at recess, in the cafeteria, on the playground, etc., so that that they know that you care about them and you're there for their benefit and well-being, you reduce the number of problems that you have. So you have preventive action. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
That's great. Well, let's talk for just a minute about resource officers. You briefly mentioned that. And around the nation, there is a lot of discussion about the positive and negative aspects of resource officers. And of course, we know, like any profession, there's going to be people that are better suited than others. And so a lot of times people are concerned that a resource officer is basically a policeman, and he or she has been trained to deal with things from a law enforcement perspective, and teachers, on the other hand, come at children from different perspectives. So what would you comment about resource officers in your experience, and what, if any, advice do you have about adequately preparing resource officers to be in public schools?
Great question, Brenda. And resource officers have become a common commodity on many campuses, especially one that have been labeled as being a campus with multiple discipline infractions on a regular basis. So, I agree that resource officers can be an effective tool. It's so important that they have the appropriate skill set to deal with those young people on campus. And you hit the nail on the head when you say many times that they come with a law enforcement, well, all of the time, they come with a law enforcement background, and that's all they know. And when we first started off, with them, we actually secured them through the local police force. And there was supposed to be some training to help them. But I found, I've had one great experience with one officer that I had in my junior high school that came with the skill set that knew how to build relationships with young people and was able to establish what I call earn power, if you will. See, when you come as a resource officer, you have two kinds of power, or you should have two. One is position power, and that position power is what you bring from your law enforcement background, and sometimes that can be frightful and forceful, but you have to work to create you some earned power. And you do that by building relationships with kids, being with them on the playground, going to athletic events with them, being at the senior prom or a dance or what have you, going on field trips, etc. And then you have to go through the appropriate professional development to put yourself in a position to know how to do your job.
Okay, great. Well, now I would like to talk a little bit about this issue that is probably pretty sensitive. But our research, and I say our research, but what we're exposed to, it's indisputable that in particular, boys of color, and usually Black, are disciplined much more harshly and much more often. And sometimes there is a disparate consequence for a Black male than there would be for a white male for the very same offense. And so this is certainly considered one of the contributors to the school to prison pipeline. And so in your years, do you agree or disagree that quite often children of color have more harsh discipline than other children?
Yes, I would agree with that. And I find that most of the time it's a lack of, like I say, cultural training. respect for different cultural backgrounds. And you look at, Brenda, unfortunately, when we look at our public schools in the 2000s now, and that the majority of our instructional staff now are females, and that's to take nothing away from females. There are many excellent instructional females. Matter of fact, they outnumber and certainly are smarter than most males. But sometimes they are unequipped to deal with the hostile male students that's coming to them and that have come from a single parent home where there's no male figure there. And so they are disruptive and they don't have the background to deal with that. And then many of those female teachers are of the Caucasian persuasion. And when you get a black male that's coming in that's hostile and stubborn, then, the only revenue or recourse that they have is to send him to the principal's office. And if you got the 3 strike you out policy, 3 times, and then he or she is expelled. So yes, that is a problem.
Well, I know one thing that surprised me. I got my teaching certificate back. I jokingly say when God was a boy back in 1970, and I have had many young friends over the years, my son's girlfriends and what have you, that went into teaching, and I was delighted to see that they now have textbooks. One that I had a chance to look over last summer, which was for white teachers in specifically how to deal with African-American boy children. And I was delighted to see that, because I think you don't know what you don't know. And it's hard to go where you haven't been. And so to put a teacher who's really has a heart for children and a desire to learn and teach, and then put them in a situation where they've had no training. I've always said, if you haven't been trained, it's hard to be blamed. And so I think that is something. Plus, you've hit on such a lack of male role models in public education. And this is something that, we are sorely lacking. And we could get into all that with the amount of money that teachers are not paid, which make it very difficult for them to, have those salaries. It's better, but it's not still that great. Well, okay. So I've got a couple of softball questions for you now. You've answered the hard ones. Frank, looking back over your vast experience in public education and knowing then what you know now, and of course you've seen the Pine Bluff district go through so much turmoil and being taken over by the state, and then you were brought in as the emergency superintendent for Dollarway schools when they fell into fiscal distress. But if you had $1 million and you could spend it any way you wanted to on education in Jefferson County today, what would you spend that money on? What investments would you make from your heart for that situation?
Boy, that's a tough one. Brenda, I think the first thing I would do if I had that $1 million here in Jefferson County or in any at-risk county, which there are numerous especially across Southeast Arkansas, but all districts have somewhat of a need, but we have a tremendous need in the Arkansas Delta, is that I would establish a solid base reading program especially for all at-risk kids, but especially for the African-American male. Research has shown and indicated that when a child is not at reading level by the end of the 3rd grade, they are 3 times more apt to be not to be a high school dropout and not to finish school, and thus to become a problem kid. So I would invest in a good, solid reading program for elementary and middle school students, and I started one here at Pine Bluff before I retired, that's built off of the 5 essential elements for reading first. And those elements are phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency, vocabulary, and text comprehension. And if you get kids reading at grade level and keep them there, reading is is the one component that overlaps all of your content areas. And so if you get them there and get them reading, they can learn, they can comprehend, they can fit in, and they can be a part of school in a positive way. The other thing is I would perhaps save some of that money for investment in constructive activities for them to go in, like the Boys and Girls Club or the RCA, clubs for them to get in and participate and maybe learn some soft skills. An idle mind is the devil's workshop. And I used to tell Bob when he first hired me as superintendent of the Pine Bluff schools, and we were talking about all of the problems that we had and all of the evils that the kids brought, and they did bring all of those to school with them every day. But I told Bob first, because he was the president and key in bringing me in, but I told my staff also that I want you to remember this. When you talk about all of the evils that kids come with, drugs, alcohol, violence, single parent homes, etc., I want you to remember that parents send us the best children they got. They're not hiding the good kids at home under the bed. And they expect us they believe, because we're teachers and principals and administrators, they believe that we're supposed to have the skill set and that we are paid to turn those kids around. So those are the factors, and that's what I would try to do with that $1 million.
Oh, wow, that is wonderful. Well, Frank, I wish you knew these wonderful women that are tuned in tonight as well as I know you, because I can say that they are a group of loving, caring women that want to bring the love of Jesus Christ to the life of young people, and they also want to desperately interrupt this school to prison pipeline. So if you could just close by giving maybe a little bit of advice to our group, if you had us as, say, if we made up your PTO or we made up a volunteer group in your community and we wanted to be involved in the schools to make a difference, what would you suggest that we do?
Boy, it's great. Any community, if they had resources like the United Women's Methodist Women Group or any other group, Hillary Rodham Clinton said it takes a whole village, and Torres referenced that it takes a whole village to raise and educate a child. So certainly we need all the help we can get, and kudos to you and the United Methodist Women Group for having a heart and a conscience and the desire to do right and to help. And if I had to name 3 or 4 things that I think you should continue to do, is one would be keep communicating the problem as you have done tonight. Keep a format of getting this out there in real life and getting people to realize that these are issues that we've discussed tonight with the resource office, with racial biases, with zero tolerance, are real issues. So keep communicating that out there and keep it in front of people. Keep this kind of inadequacies and prejudice on the front burner. Don't let us forget that we've got this problem. And I think you and Bob and I shared the other day that we're in the last 2 minutes of the 4th quarter of life, and that we ought to have the nerves and the intestinal fortitude to stand up for what's right and to correct some of the wrongs. So let's keep it on the front burner. The third thing I would do is to share resource-based information that's related to the obstacles and roadblocks for kids having a quality education.
Wow. Well, we just cannot thank you enough for sharing your experience, and for Toyce sharing her heart and her work, and for Levita sharing what she does. This has just brought such insight, I think, to all of us about what we can begin to do to make a difference in this problem that if you let it could almost seem larger than we are. But I do want to use our time we have left to answer a few questions. So if Jacob could unmic the participants and then they can answer as this question pertains to them. The first one, I think, is addressed to Levita. Do the number of children in programs that you gave on your screen, does that include the Boys and Girls Clubs providing lots of after-school care?
It does. And I think I answered in the chat, but yes, it does. And so that's all programs, whether they're school-age care, school-based, community-based. It's everyone who's currently participating in any kind of structured after-school program.
Okay. And then someone asked you about your website and you also put that in the chat, Arkansas School, AOSN, Arkansas Out of School Network.org. Also, let me, and if someone wants Joyce's poem, and let me just tell you that Jacob has, and maybe he'll show it tonight before we close, he's got the first meeting recorded with all of the overheads and PowerPoints, and you will have a link to be able to go to that. And we'll do the same thing with Joyce's poem. Whenever we share the recording for tonight, we'll have all that accompanying documentation along with that. So that will be possible. Another person wants the poem. And then one individual says she's volunteered 9 years at the Wrightsville prison. Oh, wow. And I have 100 inmates giving their stories. About 90% of these women were molested. This is a common problem and causes a downward spiral. Is this being addressed in any way by any of you that spoke tonight?
So the first thing I'll say is, Arkansas has one of the highest ratings in adverse childhood experiences in the country. We're in the top 5 and we rank consistently in the top 5, unfortunately. And so, there is a group, it's actually sponsored by Dr. Chad Rogers and others in the Arkansas Medical Care Foundation, but it's a group and we participate in that group. And each year we convene an ACES Summit, Adverse Childhood Experiences Summit, where it's a cross-sector group of educators, business folks, out-of-school time people, just concerned people in general. And there was also an ACES interim study in the legislature, and I think Representative Janie Scott was leading that. I don't know where it went. This was a challenging session, as you may know. But so we have embedded trauma-informed care practices as a best practice for after school and summer programs. We provided training on that. We partner on that. And I can just tell you that when we think about what happens with girls, that those early incidents really do change the trajectory of their life. And, it is so important. So that was a long answer, but a long way to yes, I guess you could say.
Okay.
Brenda, if you didn't ask me if you gave me $1 million, but I want to say,
Okay.
One of the things I've been trying to advocate for with different individuals and foundations and organizations and systems is for there to be created a parent resource center. See, what we got to realize that none of this can be impacted or changed unless we empower parents to help change behaviors and situations and give and have available an avenue or a resource where they can go and learn how to do things better. There's a need for parents to even learn how to conduct themselves at a parent-teacher conference. There's a need to let them know how important those things are. There's a need for them to know about parenting, about just the needs of children to have rest and have schedule and have regularity and have those things that are critical to young people. There are parents that are parenting the best that they know how. I've heard people say, well, they don't care about their children. I don't think there's a parent alive that doesn't care about their children. They lack the ability to be able to do that. And until we address, we can do all the programming for children we need to do. We can do all the supporting schools we need to do. But until we address the need for us to support parents, just from the pre-K level, the primer level, looking at the used to call pre-primer, starting at the very bottom all the way up. And I want to say again, because I think this is an opportunity for me to have this word with the United Methodist Women, the power of mentoring, the power of being a mentor is something that we don't look at, and the impact of mentoring on a life. There are probably it's 97% of the people here on this call probably can identify an adult that had a meaningful relationship with them when they were young and influenced. Maybe not, because that adult with this group might have been your family. But I have to say that the need to have a caring adult to carry you through these obstacles and through these things that come up, and just, whether they be emotional, whether they be financial, whether they, sometimes $15 can solve a problem. You can get you one of those, when they have the Scholastic book fair to school, and you go in and you end up in a principal's office, and it's all because you didn't have $15 to order some books. Simple things that could be taken care of, but the power of mentoring and the need for parents to have the ability to become better parents, because as they become better parents than their children. So we can't ignore. We can pump all the money we can into housing, into schools, and to policing, and to whatever, but until we acknowledge the impact, you can say, well, that's not my problem. I don't, I'm not going there. That's not what I'm going to do. But acknowledge the impact that efficient, caring, parenting, what that does. And it speaks volumes, because it speaks to the student, but it also speaks to the teacher. Okay, somebody's going to hold me accountable for what I do or don't do. Are they going to show up and I'm going to have to explain to them why this happened or why it didn't, and why I couldn't have done something differently. So I just wanted to leave that with you. So if you're giving out money, I want to help start a Parent Resource Center.
Great. Thank you. That's wonderful advice. Our time is coming to a close. There are some wonderful comments in the chat that are not questions, but rather comments that I'd like for you to take a second to look at. And I want to just underscore this as we look toward next week, when we're going to be divided up for a brief amount of time, but to begin to think about what we're actually going to do about this situation by UMW districts. There are rich resources in every one of our districts that pertain to this issue. And I really encourage you to use these individuals that are among us that have had experiences in the schools and in teaching and in these programs, and they will be such a rich resource for us to use as we move forward in our specific projects to make a difference in interrupting the school to prison pipeline. Let me just ask Jacob if he has anything he needs to say before we close.
Certainly. So once again, we have recorded tonight's session. The first session is available on the Arkansas Conference of the United Methodist Church's website on our webinars page. If you go to the conference website, it's under our resources, click on webinars, or you can go to that link that I've just posted in the chat. We will have the second session up as soon as we can get it up. And of course, we'll have a copy of Levita's slides and other materials shared tonight as well. Please note once again that your link for tonight is also the link that you will need to use next week for next week's session. So make sure you hold on to that link until then. And other than that, Brenda, that's all I've got to share.
Okay. Well, I just want to say once again to our presenters, thank you for taking the time to share your life and your heart and your resources with us. And let us know anytime something comes up that you feel like United Methodist Women in Arkansas can fill the bill. I guarantee you, we probably can, and we'll give it our best effort. So a good night to all of you, and I look forward to seeing you next week.